I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
The truth of the matter is that that member chaired a committee that abused and truncated the contribution of submitters, that member, by his own admission, instructed the Treasury as instructed by the Minister. In fact, he admitted in the meeting that the Treasury was instructed to produce a report on submissions. Don't shake your head. He shouldn't shake his head, because if he reads the minutes, he'd be shaking all right, but it won't be his head that is. Instructed the Treasury to prepare a report on submitters before they had finished submitting, and then in this House, he and his ilk tried to stop the official minutes of the FEC being let out and put on the website so that journalists and others could see their record of blocking the contribution of submitters. So that's the truth of the matter, and that chairman has made history in this place. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, led by the nose by his minister to do exactly what he was told, and they were so afraid of the truth getting out, sir, that even when we asked Treasury officials questions, that chairman instructed the committee to block our request to have those answers tabled at the committee before we lodged our minority reports, because they didn't want the answers. Now, there is a saying, Edmund Burke, I think, said it, that those who don't learn by their history are in danger of repeating it. And I place on record the comments of Trevor Mallard and others that, yes, in our time in the 80s in government, we sold assets. But we learnt. When I was 14, and apparently, according to the Minister, so he's totally responsible for all the ills of the 80s Labor government. We sold them, but we learnt. This mob, sir, under the Bolger government, sold the assets, and as quick as they could when they were returned to office under the Key government, they learnt nothing. And there will be a person in this House, because this is a day of shame for this House and a day of infamy for New Zealanders. There is one person, as this bill, if it goes through by a wafer-thin majority, who has never contributed anything to this debate, not one speech, not one whimper, well, maybe a wimp, but not one speech, sir, not one contribution, and that is Peter Dunn. The man, of course, who wouldn't even see his own constituents and talk through the issues. The man who has made no contribution and has hidden at every stage of this debate. And the man, sir, who will have the unique place in history as the man who gave the government the vote they required to sell every New Zealander out. The generations of New Zealanders who built these assets, the generation of New Zealanders, their grandkids and kids who have benefited from the revenue of these assets, and the future generations who will not benefit from the revenue of these assets, sir. And the truth is that this government has failed to convince New Zealanders of the worth of its proposition. We know that consistently polls have said that 80% plus of New Zealanders are against the sale of assets which they already own. And they use as their justification, of course, the fact they won an election. But what they forget, of course, to tell New Zealanders is that they booked the proceeds from the sale of those assets in the pre-fu, but did not book the loss in dividends. What they fail to tell New Zealanders, of course, is that, yes, you save $266 million in debt servicing costs, but you give up $360 million per annum in dividends, a loss to the New Zealand taxpayer of $100 million. And what these people think is that Kiwis are silly, and that after this bill, if it goes through, is passed, and after the Governor-General gives it royal assent, that, like many issues in this Parliament, once the legislation is through, Kiwis move on. The problem this government has, of course, is all this legislation does is put the bullets in the gun. It enables this government to sell assets, and then every year, at least for the next 4 to 5 years, this government's program, by their own admission, is to attempt to sell a major asset every year. So they say the first one will be Mighty River Power, and the day the power bills go out, with the large increases, etched on the memory of every Kiwi will be the words "with the compliments of John Key." Those power prices will be visited, and those increases on Kiwis ordinary Kiwi mums and dads who have no guarantee in this legislation that they will be first in the queue to get anything, because most of them don't have the $1,000 they're going to need to look after their families, let alone buy a parcel of shares. They will know that those power prices are the direct responsibility of the John Key government. And the next year we'll have another one. And the next year, which, hey presto, happens to be election year, there will be a third. And that will be a weeping sore for this government, a reminder, and Kiwis will not forget, every year another bit of the family silver goes. And they will remember, and my prediction is, they will visit retribution on these members. Peter Dunn will and is a political cadaver over this issue as we speak. The walking, the crawling dead. The body bags will be out for that member as the man who gave this government the power, the vote they need to sell out ordinary New Zealanders. They say, sir, that they expect 85 to 90% of these shares to be held in Kiwi hands. Well, let's look at the factual history of that. We have Contact Energy, that in 1999 on float had 225,000 individual shareholders, and now that's decreased by 65% to 78,225. And that was without loyalty bonus. And let's get to loyalty bonus, because the loyalty bonus simply means this, and here's the prediction. It simply puts off the fateful day when ordinary Kiwis will do what is best for them, and I respect their right to do what is best for them to survive in the economic archaeology that these people are leaving us. They will sell those shares because they will have a windfall gain. And if they do, I respect their right to do so. But here's the deal. One, that costs this crew money. And secondly, that I predict will happen, that offer will expire or take effect from just after the next election. So that Mr. Key can prance around like sort of cock sparrow and say that 95% of New Zealanders, or whatever it is, are still in the scheme. Of course they will be, because they'll wait for that loyalty bonus, they'll take that windfall gain, and then they will do what is right for them in terms of their economic survival, and that will be on sold. And there is no control in this legislation as to who, foreign or domestic, will be the recipients of those sold shares. Just like there is nothing in this legislation, as we were told at the Select Committee, nothing to stop the proverbial bus being driven through the 10% cap. Nothing to guarantee that Kiwis will be first in the queue at all. So I say to the government that they have ridden roughshod over public opinion, and they, in their arrogant way, believe that they are right. And in our society, not true, so they're wrong. Oh, wake up your mind. And in our democratic society, sir, we have a thing called an election and a parliament, and those who have the numbers can push things through. That is the nature of our sweet little democracy. But the people, sir, the people also have a say, and the people also have a memory. And the people have also said that they do not want this to continue, and the people are now out on the streets. And not just, as John Key said arrogantly, the Labour Party and its members, or the Green Party, or New Zealand First. Oh no, you've got Grey Power, which last time I checked I thought they'd have a few members over there who were a bit blue. You have Grey Power, the CTU, and a whole series of community organisations who are galvanised to stop this happening. So the next test for the government will be, of course, when this referendum gets up and is triggered, they will stand and be humiliated as 80% from a few opinion polls, in fact a lot of opinion polls, becomes formalised to, I would predict, 80% plus of the voting public in a referendum who say this government is wrong. And sir, then we will have the ultimate sanction in 2.5 years' time as members of the public go into the polling booth and give their verdict in respect of this government's conduct. And they'll remember the rush, and they'll remember the arrogant statements, and they will remember and they will stand firm on their principles, which is to say that they own these assets, they have always owned these assets, they want to continue owning these assets, and they do not want these assets flogged off by any government of any shade. And I invite Mr Dunn, wherever he may be in this chamber, I'm sure he is somewhere cowering under a desk, to think very, very carefully on that as he casts its vote. 2014, colleagues, ain't that far away.
I call the honourable member Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.